some technical. Are you dealing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll just give them the ride.
Okay, welcome to our third panel discussion, and let me introduce my guest because I forgot about our guest from Berlin, Dorian Batycka, at the beginning, and Anna Berlin and Dušan Smodej. So our third panel is about how to talk about contemporary art. And we would like to talk about how do we get contemporary art contents covered by the relevant media, and how do we approach an international media world, and does it has to be a scandal to get into the news, Dorian? We have quite an international crowd here, and let me briefly introduce them. Anna Berlin is coming from the world of theater and visual art, and she held a teaching position at the Sorbonne for 6 years. She later founded a public relations agency, ABC, Anna Berlin Communications, in Vienna, and now works for clients from creative industries, architecture, art design, and film in Austria and abroad. Dorian Batycka is an art critic and curator raised in Canada and based in Berlin. He contributes regularly to magazines like Hyperallergic and others, where he often covers intersection between art, finance, and scandal. And also Dušan Smodej. He's a producer, artist himself, and curator based in Ljubljana. He is a managing director of the Fotopub Festival held in Novo, Mesto, and president of the Fotopub Association. This panel should be moderated by my colleague Jure, but he fell ill, and now Dorian will be his double.
Yeah, hi. Jeez. A bit nervous now. I always get nervous public speaking, but it's because, I'm a writer. I'm not really a speaker, so I just thought. I don't know my questions. Oh, right. I got the questions. So I think it's really interesting to be here and on this panel because there's a lot of really interesting speakers that deal with like the market and economics and fairs and the business of art. And I think I kind of come from a different perspective, whereas I've only very recently gotten into let's say going to art fairs and stuff. Actually, my background comes from club culture and music and subculture and kind of even to a certain extent gonzo journalism and so. But I think to ignore let's say the market aspect of art and even the title of this conference art is for sale, I initially felt wow, okay, that's a new one for me, but I think to ignore it is either you're really crust punk as fuck or just naive. So I mean, but and so to ignore it is kind of something that I've kind of grown out of. I would say I was crust punk as fuck, and now I'm no longer naive. But I don't know. So anyway, so I think it's very interesting to be on a panel with a PR agent, because PR agents are people who actually I work with quite a bit. It's kind of the secret of a lot of art journalism is that a lot of artists who go to all these biennials and film festivals, you're either supported from a museum, a publication that you work for, or in the case where you freelance, maybe you're working hand in hand with a lot of PR agents, some of whom are fantastic, some of whom are terrible.
We are fantastic.
I mean, the best ones actually know your angles, right? It's like having a friend who takes the best photos of you. That's what having good PR agents are. They know your angles, boo-boo. And that's kind of, but I mean, so, it's, I think as a writer, your responsibility is to an audience. Whereas PR people, their responsibilities are to their clients, which can be amazing clients. Sometimes they can be Phillips Tobacco. So, you just kind of gotta know your vibe. And it was really funny because I was on Facebook the other day posting, I'm oh, I'm going from Venice to Cannes. And my friend posted like, are you going to go to like arms fairs next? And I was like, ooh, ouch. But yeah, so I think my question as a sort of new moderator of this, segueing from my bio into, you know, also working with like fairs and like, you know, to a certain extent like public events and festivals. I think it's interesting to talk about like the dynamics of how the culture happens between the three of us. Because, you know, I think a lot of times fairs will employ PR companies that are maybe based in London or bigger cities to generate like press, which can in turn feed into like, let's say the cultural capital, the sort of the anticipation of festivals and fairs. And I think as journalists, like we recognize that, yeah, like it's really cool to go to like smaller like underground fairs that aren't like Coachella or like, you know, Venice Biennial or something, which, you know, all of them are lame, including our Basel. So on that note, I've never been to Vienna Contemporary FYI, so I can't say anything
What
about
an
that.
occasion.
But okay, so let's kind of, you know, I think segue into, Anna, like your thoughts on this like kind of field and matrix.
Actually, I do have my microphone. Keep yours. One of the questions that Jure, who was not here, was actually preparing is like, you know, PR is like you don't grow up or you don't have a dream of like, I'd like to be a PR person. You know, I want to be a painter, I want to be a gallerist. You don't wake up one day and say, I want to be a PR person. And that was, but that's actually the good thing about it, because I always, so I say that I filled a niche, I filled a need when I found my own agency. Because there are two parts that nobody wants to do in the art world. It's raising money and calling the press. So if you do the garbage work, you know, you make lots of money with it. And yeah, and then the other question somebody was asking, what is a good PR? You know, what makes a person a good PR? And the contrary of what you think, it's not talking, it's not being communicative, it's listening, and it's knowing what somebody else wants. And that's the journalist, and that's the client, and that's, I'm breaking news here, so that makes me nervous. But no, that's actually the secret. And I think it's, as a PR person, I'm a bit of like the galleries between the client and the media, so to speak. And like one of the advices that I give sometimes is like when you're at a fair, for example, as a gallerist, and everybody wants to sell their piece. You know, everybody wants to sell their story, basically. I sell a story, you sell pieces. The journalist sells the story to the readers. But what you should do is to find out more about who you're talking to first. That's the first question. The first question is not, may I show you all what I have? The first question is, who are you? What brought you here? Why are you here? What are you interested in? Are you an artist? Are you a gallerist? Are you buying? Have you ever bought something? Who are you? You know, this is breaking a line, and this is actually what a good PR person is doing. It's like, who are you as a client? Who are you as an architect? Why do you do art? Who needs your art? You know, there's enough art out there. Who needs your book? Who needs you as a journalist? You know? And then you tell me your story. You give me what you're interested in. And then it's me, the matchmaking, we had the work before, of finding you the right stories and make your life easier.
Right, and I totally agree. And this is kind of what I was trying to say before, where there are like really amazing people who are working within this field of PR, which actually has a bad rap. It's also like calling, I was just in Cannes and I called someone like these photographers the paparazzi, and I found out that it's like, you know, it's a deeply offensive term to these people. They consider themselves as something like else. But that's because, yeah, there is a sort of, way of, you know, understanding that the media is something that exists, and to like, not understand how the sort of mechanics of that work is actually, yeah, like you need to understand that there are like, you know, issue-based reporting and sort of things that are happening within the world that I think people who are in PR, they understand. Like the history of PR goes back to like Edward Bernays and like these incredible, it goes back to like the history of psychoanalysis. Edward Bernays was the, I believe, nephew of Sigmund Freud. And even to a certain extent, you know, you have these great thinkers like, you know, like who's the guy who did hypernormalization? Adam Curtis. You know, he's looking into the history of PR in some of his films and about how it shapes public opinion and perception. And I think to understand that, like, doesn't necessarily have a bad connotation. It just means that you're sort of working within that ecosystem. And
I share a picture that I just have in my mind. I thought it's worth sharing because Actually, I have a grandfather who was apparently born in Maribor, so I have a connection to the city. And I come from Vienna, so I come from a small country, so I know kind of like small country market issues. And I never felt like a small agency, actually. And I started, the agency saying that I have clients in Paris and Berlin and Vienna, and it all happens afterwards. So sometimes you picture things and then it happens. And the other thing which I thought of, as a PR person, because I come from a family of like priests and surgeons. And I kind of like see myself sometimes, in between a priest and a therapist and a surgeon, like operating at the heart, because everything that goes out to the media and into public, it's always core. You can have a team of 100 people, and you can build something for years and years, and you can work with, lots of other people and collaborators. At the end of the day, somebody is giving the interview. Who is this person, and who's saying the core words? And this is a very interesting way of working. So that's, I guess.
Right, and I think touching on, bringing you, Dušan, into the conversation is that we were just discussing how it's odd that we have this conference here talking about art, talking about culture with, very few people who are actually self-identifying as artists on the actual panel. So, and I think that's also the critical importance of like festivals and things that interface with the public, is that as a journalist, I'm sort of working in a cave, whereas I think you are very working within a sort of, you're bringing this to people, and in a different way than a journalist, or a PR agent is, for example. Like, you are doing it in a very different way by having this sort of public platform, and then programming and curating, I guess, is another word that we like to use in the biz. So yeah, maybe you would like to sort of talk about how you see yourself fitting onto this panel and your background.
Yeah, basically we started as a very small thing in 2014, and the whole festival and everything that grew up around it started as a group of friends, and it really spread as a group of friends as well. Only last year we started working with a Berlin-based PR agency, and it was a great idea because we found out it's impossible to get big journalists without PR agents. But it is possible to get real people without PR agents, and that's something that I really appreciate about
So we're not real people.
You're on paper. But yeah, that's something that we were talking before, how big festivals and art fairs and everything are kind of lame. Because for me, we go to a lot of those things, and we meet a lot of people, and we forget a lot of people. And on small things that are kind of friendly and family-like and so on, you meet some people and you don't forget any, which is really important for me. And this is how we started spreading our word through mouth by mouth, through positive experiences, and this was our approach to PR at the beginning.
When did you guys start?
In 2014. Yeah, but of course, yeah, that's our approach to PR as well.
Love the humor.
There's more of them.
You're thirsty. You're thirsty. You're talking.
Thank you.
Please stop. Yeah?
Yeah. Hey, buddy.
Oh,
Hey.
hi.
Welcome
to Slovenia. Have a nice day.
Yeah, but I think if we go out of this whole romantic thing a bit, the reality is still quite harsh, and it's impossible to get sponsors without big articles in big newspapers and so on. And then at some point you find out that it's not enough to just have a group of cool people in a small town in Novo getting drunk and making art. And if you want to do something bigger, you have to kind of, go.
From a PR standpoint, the dog is a very helpful tool, actually. So we got back to the best picture of today. I'm just pointing it out that this is actually very good.
Yeah, but yeah, that's how we decided to start working with a PR agency, in Berlin. And in a year we got this article in The Guardian, for instance, naming us one of the 5 best photography institutions in the world. Which kind of, and some other things, of course, but those things start opening funding possibilities. And for me, hiring a PR agent is definitely an investment that is going to come back quite soon.
But may I point out, Chris, I think that's a very important thing you said, that PR is not only working from the outside, that actually other people know about you, but it works so much to the inside in the sense of like people who are my community and my crowd accept the work that I do and appreciate the work, and that's like such an important to be seen, this awareness, to raise the awareness for this matter as well, I think is a very fulfilling thing to do when you do press, also as a journalist, of course. Do you feel do you feel sometimes that you're kind of like a kingmaker as a journalist if you're like putting people up and like on the platform and make them seen? Do you have that kind of, is it a thrill, is it nice?
I would say yes, it is, but it's not easy because there's editorial oversight, and like oftentimes like I can write something or do something and it might even get killed, like DOA, right? There's a saying in the biz, you get ghosted, by editors too. So it's like it can be harsh and brutal. Like you want to write about a scene, you want to bring something up, and the editor's like, it's not Tino Segal, it's not Philip.
So the freedom of a journalist is also limited to a certain
exactly.
extent.
You have to kind of know your audience and know what you can bring up. And I think specifically as an art journalist, or let's say an art historian, I think the best way to insert like
Let's do it.
in spirit, really in spirit. That's quite the. Oh my goodness! Is this like a Buddhist retreat? Can I come up there and like meditate?
Of course you can.
What are we looking at?
What do you guys go?
I might some goulash.
Oh, okay.
Catering.
Dušan, how are you financing the festival? What's the hardest part of, is media helping to finance? Because I think this is
Also an important thing, about PR, that the more media you get, the easier it is sometimes to raise money.
That's
is
the
that
plan,
a thing?
That's the plan. It's slowly getting there, but we're still kind of mostly dependent on public funding, which in Slovenia isn't that good, but still we're quite successful in getting funding outside of Slovenia. But yeah, now slowly we're starting on some larger corporate sponsorships and so on through media coverage that we have. But I see it as a bit of a longer term process.
Another question, a personal question, how important is the media scene in Slovenia itself? Is it you're pointing out it's not enough written about art, but that's like a phenomenon that we have everywhere. So art is a niche and we don't feel it, but it's actually, it's not for 90% of the population, it's a bit not so important. So how's the media scene in Slovenia?
It's, when we talk about art media, we almost have none. We have some art journals they're not covering events, but mostly scientific articles. But it's really rare that you see some art critiques in media and so on.
What about outsider art?
Outsider, yeah. But they also don't cover events.
They don't. I wrote for them once. We did a show.
We had a media corporation with them, so we did work with them too. I mean, from Slovenia
Is
to
anyone from
Austria, it
outside
is.
or
I need some magazines.
No one from
Yeah.
outside of here. I guess it's Ljubljana based.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you live on your writing? Is that something you can live on?
Yeah. I mean, I live meagerly, but yeah. I mean, it's possible. Like, I started when I was 18 writing art reviews for free. I'll probably die writing it for free, to be honest with you. I still write for free, but I also mostly get paid for it now. But yeah, it takes time, and you just got to kind of like hack at it. And like, I think the best advice that I could give to like a young journalist is like, don't take rejection personally, like, because it's a fact of life. You're pitching to editors all the time. You're always pitching ideas. Sometimes, I just yesterday wrote an article that was edited twice by one editor, and then they killed it. So, it was like, these things just like happen, and like to just have a sort of thick skin and a good attitude, because a good attitude will make you really easy to work with. Editors hate working with people who like cry if they change a comma. It's like, don't think you're like God's gift to the written language, basically. Just like have a good attitude, stay humble, use humor as much as you can in your writing. No one likes to read like boring art theory anymore. Sorry, you plugs.
I think what's really interesting that
One of the things that I fight a lot with is that clients expect journalists to write their opinion. I mean, you want to have a free media, and you want to have everybody who's like,
Yeah.
But then at the end, if anybody dares
to not even critique, you know, but just like not write a bit besides what they actually made them write, you know, it's like, it's such a hurting issue thing, and instead of like, you know, having the conversation
That's why
going
I
on,
really feel for you guys sometimes.
and I see, I know.
It's a tough thing, right? Because you can never control what the journalist is going to do.
One of my favorite stories of last year was a building in Vaduz, and the journalist put it on the cover and wrote, "Vaduz has born a monster." And it was like, sure.
But there's the saying, like, any press is good press.
Well,
right?
of course, it was the cover as well, you know, and that's, but that's part of the PR work, I guess, you know, but I think it's also part of like the gallery scene, the artist scene, you know, everybody else to kind of like, and it's interesting to hear from a journalist perspective, you know, also you are not as free and like just doing whatever you'd like to write, you know.
No. I'm just curious, like how many times does that sort of monster story happen per year for you, or like how often?
It is actually funny because, you know, when the journalist, and it was a press trip, so they were invited and and, you know, then the journalist actually sends me the article personally, you know, and like, hi. And I'm like, it's all cool, thank you, you made my day, but I guess I take the ball, you know. And then, you know, I have one really good argument. It's like fainting now, but I always say you don't want to have a Trump world, right? So we better have a free press and we let them write, you know. And then nobody wants to be Trump, so it's like okay. And
so that's your sort of like.
Yeah, well, you know, usually it's very hard to actually find somebody who's actually daring to make or give an opinion. I think this is, you know, in our world we are so used to not criticize and to just slip away, you know.
Here in the Slovenian scene, getting an opinion from a journalist is something that you really
It's
want.
not just a Slovenian phenomenon.
Yeah.
And I thought,
then we're happy even if it's a bad opinion. You know, it is an opinion. You got a critique, so good.
I think at the end of the day, it's respecting the other's work, you know, in the sense of like, if it's respectful, also like to respect that an artist has, you know, put lots of thought into something. An architect has spent years in like constructing something, and it's not just done by like writing, oh, I don't like it, I think it's ugly, you know.
Quantifying it.
But then, you know, and then
constructively.
But this was always kind of a challenge for us, how to make journalists not just copy our press releases.
Right.
This is what do I have to do to write something on your own?
Right. But I will say this, you know, as someone who, like, I've broken a lot of like scandalous stories involving like financial irregularities, you know, like Me Too stuff. Like, I've been like really focused on like breaking stories and working within news specifically. And I think that is also a crucial difference between, like, let's say a journalist and an art critic. An art critic is like, you're trending art history, you're writing about aesthetics, and you're writing about, you know, like intersectional ideas, and you're bringing a sort of critical academic background to it. But when you're working within the news, it's like I often say, like, sometimes if I break a story that can be, you know, harmful to like someone or something, it's like, you know, you do your fact checking, you exercise like journalistic ethics and responsibility, and you back check, and you do all of these things. And, you know, I don't make that news, right? So you don't kill the messenger is like something, you know, I always say is like, you know, I didn't fuck up, dude. Like, go, don't bother me. So I think that's, these are some of the memes. I also make memes, but sometimes I just steal memes. This is from the film. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it's important to have a sense of humor, I think, about what I do. And so, you know, on my personal Instagram, I'm always posting funny memes, art memes. I'm a memeologist, I call myself.
I'm also selfish.
Should we open up to questions?
On that note, yeah, maybe we can open up to your questions.
So, I think you kind of covered in your very lively conversation what Jure had planned for you. Dušan, maybe because you said you were shortlisted, or you were on the list of 5 best with Fotopub, 5 best photo events in the world this year or last year, was it? Yeah. So Fotopub Festival, is it really about photography?
Yeah, that's the main problem we have. Fotopub started, as we know it now, it started from the ruins of a festival that was going on before since 2001. I was working on it, then it went bankrupt. I took it over, and then together with 7 other friends, we decided we're gonna turn it into something that we're doing. We were all studying photography at that point. Now, no one of us is doing photography anymore. We all went out from photography into fine art, really various practices in contemporary art, and that's where Fotopub went as well. But now we're stuck with the name. Pub part still works. Photo part doesn't work anymore. And well, yeah, we're always saying that we're researching the photographic in various contemporary art practices, which kind of works because nowadays the photographic is really present in various concepts or processes or any other forms of contemporary art practices, especially through contemporary technologies and so on. But yeah, now we're in the Guardian as one of the best photography institutions in the world. Now the goal is to go in there as one of the best art institutions in the world, but that's going to take some time. It's so funny because the photography scene is so much smaller than the art scene. That it's so easier to approach, and I think it was a very good idea that we started in the photography scene because we were able to get widely known in the scene way quicker than if we started in the art scene where we would be really a small fish in the fish tank.
Maybe that's another PR secret, actually, you know, that you need to find the niche and be profound in your niche instead of like trying to do like the big guys, you know, from the very beginning, and that's interesting
For
to
sure, yeah. We were talking about like our love for smaller, like more niche festivals before the panel
places
started.
that are exotic, you know, stuff that
yeah.
not everybody sees everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
And that probably expands even, you know, to galleries and fairs in like bigger contexts, you know, to have this kind of like curiosity triggered by people, you know, and to surprise, and instead of, you know, giving what everything seems to work, you know. So.
And it's really funny because on that note, I was just talking to an editor from, you know, Lonely Planet, like this guide, travel guide that everyone
I
has.
think people will hear you at the end.
Oh, sorry.
So
So I was talking to this editor the other day from Lonely Planet, which is like this very famous travel guide, and she was saying she is very careful about what she covers, whether it's a festival or like a hotel, because, you know, as soon as it goes in Lonely Planet, it's like a viral hit, and the tourism could like cause ecological damage to like some place. Like, so she's like, actually, like, Dorian, there's like secrets that we don't put in Lonely Planet. Like, what? I want to get on like the like Lonely Planet backlist. Like all the editors have this like crazy dope black backlist. It's just like you go to like amazing places from like all
But that's
the.
what happened with like pages like Spotted by the Locals or so on.
Yeah.
It kind of, a lot of the articles that ruined cool places because now they're full of tourists. So.
But how did I mean, like, you when was the article like when you came out? I mean, of course it's a boost, you know. Then you get corporate sponsors. It comes with so many great things.
With us, we're lucky that the town we're doing it in is so small that it can get big. It's really quite good because if this thing gets bigger than it is, then it's just gonna get less and less personal.
Okay, listen, I have a great idea for you.
Yeah, God pointed out a couple of times, just like pointing out again. But social media, it's like, you know, wherever you are, and no matter how small the market locally is, you know, and then, you know, this is like part of course, you know, it's also changing the, you know, the deal that you have as an artist with a gallery, I'd say, you know, but it's like, there are lots of possibilities nowadays to actually make your story heard.
Yeah, and a big way is like, you know, you guys are Slovenian. Get Slavoj Žižek and Melania to debate at your next festival.
We'll be all over it.
She's not
True, we
going.
come up with a project, that's how we end the discussion. We have a plan.
Slavoj
Should we
and
open,
Melania.
did we answer all the other questions? We have heard so much already. Do we have any? Are we done? We go to drinks?
Discussing the aesthetic merits of photography.
Decisive moments and so on.
Yeah, exactly.
More questions from the audience?
You guys have endured a lot, 3 panels. It's a marathon
Out
style.
of any kind of form, but yes, you answer all the questions. No, but Dorian, I wanted to ask you, you came to cover one of our exhibitions, was it last year or was it?
November, yeah.
November, and it was really kind and nice view, and it was really, you know, also a surprising thing. Why would you be interested in a periphery?
Yeah, well, I mean, the exhibition was called No Looking Back, okay, but we're going to look back a little bit right now. I've always been interested in like sort of decentering like art world discourses, and like biennials are a major global player, globalization, art fairs, but I think a lot of what happens, actually interesting things happen in, like, you know, I grew up in a small town in Canada called Hamilton. It's like a very small town, and we had a great like local artist scene, and like the music scene was popping. We had like really amazing quality culture, and I think growing up in sort of that environment, like in the shadow of big Toronto, always sort of made me think like, yeah, there's so many rad, amazing things happening everywhere. And I think the one universal condition that all of us as humans have, beyond sex, of course, is like art. And like we all communicate and we all make art in every culture. Like, no, for real. Like, I mean, everywhere's procreating, everywhere's making art. Like some people do different languages, and some people like, you know, it's like, it's so universal that we all practice it in some level or another. And like, so, you know, going to smaller places and like, that is where the richness happens, and that's where you get that real sort of, quote unquote, real culture, I guess.
I have a comment for Vaza, who was doing something else. No, but I was, you know, there was one thing that I was thinking of, how the curiosity is triggered, you know, because you said it's like the overwhelmingness of the art market, you know, there's a bit of like the journalist who is like trying to discover new path, you know, and I thought that was one of the things that I wanted to ask, is like, you know, what's still triggering you to find, or where do you find new, I'm opening it to the audience now, but, you know, where do you go to find like new positions that's still surprising to you, if it's not the art market and the usual suspects?
What?
Artist-wise.
Now it's getting more and more peripheral, I think. It's much less, well, art fairs, at least the big ones, at least and most of them are big, are less interesting because they're getting more and more kind of commercial oriented. So let's say very small project-based situations, much like that one maybe. Like let's say there is a small, we were just talking, there is a small thing called Artorama in Marseille, for example, end of August. There is Palazzo near Rome. There's this kind of very small happenings in between the gallery. If we're talking gallery market, if we're talking exhibitions, I think that also the biennials are getting tiring and less effective as a model. So it's mainly the exhibitions that you're interested in and you go and see them. I don't think that this I mean, basically the last 20 years have seen the proliferation of everything from art fairs to biennials. I mean, there's biennial everywhere, I think almost.
Every week.
Well, it's a branding, of course.
So
It's, you know,
basically,
it's
it's also
titling.
physically impossible to cover all of that. So I think this is where journalists come in. They have to see it.
Yeah, I've been to 10 cities in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, somebody has to see it and somebody has to tell us. But generally, I think it's getting more and more peripheral. I think you might find an interesting gallery in a place like Bratislava.
Yeah.
Easier than, sometimes easier than in Vienna.
I mean, I add that like also media-wise it's the same thing, because you don't have like the one title that everybody is reading, and you don't have like the one critic who is actually core to your show to actually make opinions, except very few, as in the gallery scene, as artist scene, as architects, you know, you have always a peak. But it's like, and it's making actually our work more ambitious, because you have many more people who are participating in the field, and you have to find them, you know, which makes it interesting but not as easy. I think we were also the media market was much easier before. It was like, you know, a few main lines you followed, you knew the right kind of people, there was the right kind of critics, and, you know, if you had them on your side, you were kind of like self-made, you know. And now it gets like this periphery is also a phenomenon. Twitter is a wonderful tool for that, you know. It's like if you want to know more about who is writing about you, go online.
Yeah, like to touch on that point, like, so I think it was Ben Davis in ArtNet, he did a study of every single artist in Ralph Rugoff's International Pavilion, and it was over 70% of artists in this year's Venice Biennial that either came from New York, Paris, or Berlin. So, you know, actually, you know, when you get these kind of statistics, you start realizing that the art market is sort of like skewed towards these centers, and it still is very much. Like, the art world's credit, they've done a lot to bring issues to the table, you know, whether they be like the like representation of minorities or women, like with groups like the Guerrilla Girls. They've done a fantastic job, like highlighting these sort of disparities. But actually, not much is still being talked about these sort of peripheries beyond these like mega art capitals, and you know, like actually, it's kind of cannibalizing, I think, the art world in that way. And yeah, that's not really been part of my sort of core interest. My core interest has always been that sort of undercurrent. So they also, yeah, anyway, let's get to the wine, eh?
Wine, it's the same.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same as with the wine.
Yeah, exactly.
We're a really small wine country with great wine.
Yeah, I had
It's really hard to sell it.
Prosecco last night.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a
But this is it, and that's what I'm always questioning myself, is it better to be in a big city in the center and be easily seen but one of the many, or is it better to be somewhere in the middle of nowhere and struggle to get people there? But using internet is quite easy now.
Also, I mean, there are, PR is also like a craftsmanship, it's not just blah blah, it's not just, so at the end of the day, of course, in order to be as a periphery, become a bit of something, especially if you want to sell something, or if you want to be, with this, there are, of course, and then I think, like wine, or, having your brand, and like finding your niche within, but of course there are possibilities, and then you need to identify them, and then again work with professionals. I think everybody plays an important role here. I think this is kind of like to end the panel, maybe, that periphery and being a small market and being a small gallery of things is not a disadvantage. It's actually where we're moving to, and thinking big is obviously helpful.
Sure, yeah. Hell yeah.
That's an optimistic note.
That's great. So,
Living in mind.
Yeah.
any questions from the public? Okay, so we.
But wait, actually, well, I was going to say, could I ask? Well, I could also ask Joanna the question after, but I also had a question for, like, some other people who were speaking earlier, and I couldn't get them in yet. Unless y'all want to get some wine.
No, ask
Let me read the basic.
ask a question.
But I wanted to know, like, Joanna, like, in your experience running a fair, do you ever feel like, I've interviewed fair directors before, I'm not going to say who, but I've asked them this question before, especially if some of them have more of a background in collecting, let's say, whether they ever feel like there's a conflict of interest at play, whether you're, mediating between too much of an advisory role to clients or galleries, or a director. Like, have you ever encountered such a thought or a gray area in the market?
Well, I mean, I started in January, so it's pretty fresh.
But you're coming from Kona Gallery, right? So you do have a relationship with existing galleries. So what I mean, I'm not trying to insinuate that you do have a conflict of interest, but do you see the potential for one to possibly arise ever in this role?
I do not necessarily see a conflict of interest, but I see an advantage in my background. I used to work for quite a number of galleries, and König Gallery, for example, it's also like I took a break in between, so there is like a distance, and this was also very important for me because then there is no conflict whatsoever for me, because I think that I'm professional enough that also I can just distance myself from that, and I have my role as an artistic director of Vienna Contemporary now, and I think that based on my background with the galleries, also with the collectors, I used to work with and for collectors as well. So it's an ideal situation for me in terms of I can merge my experience and my knowledge and so forth, and really now put all this effort and energy into pushing forward Vienna Contemporary. And for me, of course, my first clients are the galleries, and the galleries we are representing at the fair, and then at the same time the collectors and the partner institutions, because for me it's very important that we are Vienna Contemporary in the middle of Vienna. I mean, it's also about the city, and it's also about the vicinity, of course. It's about Central and Eastern Europe as well. So these are my interests, and I do not see any conflict whatsoever, because I think that it's like it's been a little while back, so it's okay.
No, and I'm sorry if I insinuated that.
No, I think it's a good question. consumption. So
I was just, it's something that I've always wondered, because there's an increasing like debates now, because I think it was Gagosian that just opened like an art advisory firm.
maybe they will open up an art fair next.
Right, so I think that's kind of, yeah, you see, because the art market is also the most unregulated market in the world. So we got to have that conversation later.
Scandal.
Scandal in Maribor.
All right.
So I would just like to conclude this evening. Thank you very much, all the panelists, not just the last one. Thank you for contributing to this debate. I think it was kind of a pop-up discussion, and it could be a start of a very much more structured debate that we need in Slovenia on the art market. It can be just something that we open up and with other players and stakeholders can develop it further. But thank you very much for bringing all your personal insights and experience to it. And I would like to conclude our evening and invite you all also to buy some paper matters and take it home. So, and have some wine, please. Thank you. And thank you all the audience for coming and staying with us.